have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
Violence is self-defeating. He who lives by the sword will perish by the sword.
Transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream.
The life of Martin Luther King in my own life had some really powerful connections. I was born in 1958, so in 1968 I was 10 years old. And I will remember the day that Martin Luther King died as if it happened 5 minutes ago. My parents were out of town, and when they would go away, they would often ask kind of a grandmotherly type lady in our neighborhood to come watch my two brothers and me. I was 10, my brother Steve was 7, my brother Pat was 2. This woman who would watch us was kind of grandmotherly and friendly, and we really liked her and she liked us. We were watching TV and the news came on, a news bulletin about Dr. King being killed, shot and killed in Memphis. And this woman who we loved blurted out, "Serves that blank right." I'm not going to say what she said, but it was a racist expletive. And I was shocked. I remember this like it was yesterday. I'm a 10-year-old. This is a nice person. When you're a kid, you know, people who are nice to you, you think they're good people. And if people are mean to you, you think they're bad people. And I was so confused. I knew it was wrong. How could you celebrate that somebody was shot? How could you use language like this? I thought you were a good person, but now I realize you might be a good person in some ways, but you got evil in you too. I have always described that day as, in my life, that was like the death of childhood. It was like, you know, the innocence that you have about people, if they're nice to you, they must be good, kind of got torn away in that moment, and I'll never forget it. It was also a time of tremendous turmoil. You know, I remember coming home when I was 5 years old and seeing my mother cry because John F. Kennedy had been killed. And then this happened when I was 10, and then a few months later, Bobby Kennedy, and then the Vietnam War and civil rights protests. So my childhood was probably what a lot of young people are living through today. COVID, George Floyd's murder, attack on the Capitol. A lot of young people today are growing up with a very challenging situation that probably is confuses them, makes them mad. But I just, maybe because of that, I was aware of Dr. King before, but then I really wanted to know more. So started to read about his life, read biographies of Dr. King, read speeches of Dr. King's. And I continue to go back and find new things that he said or wrote about.
Well, I think his legacy and his personality, his courage, inspired me to believe that not only can I do anything, but I can really change the world. And I know that might sound a little naive, but I think the courage, the determination, the sacrifice, the drive that Martin Luther King Jr. showed through his unfortunately very short life has to lead us to the conclusion that one person, one community, one city, one state can really change the world for the better if they're rowing in the same direction with other like-minded people. And I think especially when we talk about the plight of African Americans and Black people and brown people in this country, making sure that we're unwavering in our pursuit of equality and equity, and making sure that the system that was not in any way created for us ultimately becomes one that is for us.
Dr. King was a man that was guided by principles and integrity. And I believe today that those principles that he was guided by actually elevated him to be in many ways, one of the most hated men in America, but yet one of the most beloved. And I believe that what he left for us was a consciousness about the beloved community, and that we had an obligation to protect, to support, to nurture, to help develop the beloved community that he so dreamed about.
Dr. King really worked to create a beloved community where there was no hatred, no racism, no sexism, and he fought for that even in the face of hatred, and kept in his heart a love of his fellow humankind. And so I think that really helps me to stay grounded and focused on the greater good, even in the face of adversity.
Dr. King has always played a prominent role in, my upbringing in terms of he has always been the North Star when it comes to love and how we treat others with dignity. But also I look to Dr. King for his work and his commitment to beating back the three evils, the evil of racism, the evil of poverty, and the evil of war. In my time on this great earth, at 41 years now, I've seen all three.
What he did influenced other countries, and how other countries and other groups that were oppressed and marginalized, whether it was women or whether it was members of the gay and lesbian community or whether it was union workers, his dream coupled with his desire and action to make that dream a reality not only benefited the civil rights movement, not only helped mobilize the civil rights movement, but it helped mobilize all of the movements that we as a country and as a world and as a society are benefiting from now.
When I think about the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr., I think about actual work and how that impacted those individuals that lived in that day and time, and how that still impacts us. A lot of times folks focus on I have a dream speech, and not even the entire speech, but take out parts of that speech that I think make people comfortable, and instead of the uncomfortable parts of it that actually change not just us as a people, but us as a country.
I think I read something that said his approval rating was like in the 20s, 20%. Yet he was following his heart, and he was working for those that needed it. And so today, I find encouragement, not because I'm trying to save money or it's a day off or it's some party to go to, but I look at somebody who, in the midst of the human journey, was focused on the work and focused on the people. And those were the two motivating things, and everything else would take care of itself.
And so even though he might be discouraged and unhappy with some of the political and cultural events that we're all familiar with and unhappy about, I think he would be encouraged by the fact that we have decided to stand on his shoulders and see how much further we can take his vision and his dream.
To me, Martin Luther King Jr. is a symbol of the promise of American values, and kind of more importantly, the citizens' duty to play a role in living up to those American values. I think that the kind of most famous example of that for people is when he gives his I Have a Dream speech, and he talks about the promissory note of the founders, and that America hadn't lived up to it for African Americans, and that's why they were fighting for civil rights. And so I think when you think about Martin Luther King Jr., it's really about that idea of living up to what our country says it stands for, and the fact that all of us, right, not just politicians, not just the wealthy, not just some of us, but all of us have a job to play in living up to those values and fighting for those values.
He said, the struggle of dispute and conflict is absolutely necessary to get to the place where you want to be, to get to a positive place and a better outcome. And so while we may have conflict, while we may have disagreements with our neighbors, our friends, our family, just know and trust and always be mindful and work towards that goal that is going to get to a better place, even through that conflict, even through those tough times. And I think that is an important piece of Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy.
Dr. King wasn't an elected official. He was called to serve, whether it was from his vantage point within the clergy and in the faith community. He was involved in politics and government. And for me, when I first got involved in politics, I was able to work for a gentleman who stated this quote that still lives with me today. And I'm going to paraphrase it here, and he said it, everybody can be great because anybody can serve. Your subject and verb don't have to agree to serve. You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You just have to have a heart full of grace and a soul generated by love. That was from Dr. King.
Time and time again, we have seen the issues change, but the roots of those issues are still reflective of what he was fighting for during his time, and we see those things show up even today. And what we can take away from the fight that he put forward during that period in time where he was with us and alive and building up leaders to work alongside him is that we must do the same, that we must continue to push forward, because were it not for his fights, I would not be able to be in a position of leadership. And if I were not to fight, there may not be others that can stand in positions of leadership as we move into the future.
I want people to take away that MLK Day isn't just one day where we stop and celebrate Dr. King's life, but that we really take that day to rededicate ourselves towards building the beloved community. John Lewis, who was an ally, partner with Dr. King in his final message to us, said that democracy is not a state, but an action that requires every generation to do its part to build towards the beloved community. And so MLK Day should be the day that we pause and see where we are, remind us where we came from, and then ask the question, where do we go from here? Which was a question Dr. King really focused on in the last year of his life, and then rededicate ourselves to achieving his dream.
And I want to remind young people all across the Commonwealth to remember the principles, the integrity, and everything that the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. stood for. He has passed the torch on to so many leaders, and now in this moment, he has passed the torch on to us. We must stand tall, we must stand bold, and we must continue to push the future that we desire to see as he once did, so we can stand in this moment today.
I think Martin Luther King Jr. is an embodiment of the average citizen saying, I'm going to step into government, into politics, into the public realm to fight for the things that I believe are true. And is a representative of somebody who, no matter what he was doing in the moment, no matter whether he was working on segregated bus cars or the right to vote or the right to earn a decent wage, everything he was doing was filtered through those values that he believed America held. And I think he's a great example that public servants should keep in mind of everything you're doing. Are you doing it through those values that you hold true? Are you doing it through American values? Are you doing it to make us a better country and to make our constitutional values more true?
Read the sermon about the drum major instinct, go back and look at the letter from the Birmingham jail, find inspiration for the work that I'm called to do now. So Martin Luther King is a big part of the desire that I have to continue to speak truth to power, continue to be an advocate for those who don't have a voice and space that I have.
One of my favorite quotes from Dr. King was a quote that was actually a reference to Virginia. He doesn't say Virginia in it, but it's a reference to the first Africans coming into English North America at Point Comfort, Virginia. And he spoke about it twice, actually. Once he said, we may have come over on different ships, but we're in the same boat now. Talking about, we got here different ways to this country, but we're all in the same boat now. The other thing he said was Dr. King was really advocating against the Vietnam War, and that was really controversial for some. Even some who appreciated his civil rights advocacy, they were sort of like, maybe it's not patriotic to be talking against the Vietnam War. So his patriotism was challenged. And his response when his patriotism was challenged was he, and by the extension, other African-American civil rights leaders who were against the war, he said, you really can't challenge our patriotism. We were here before Plymouth Rock. And we spent centuries building this country, most of it in chains, and most of us not getting paid for doing it. You can't question our patriotism. That reference, we were here before Plymouth Rock, is a reference to the fact that The Africans who came into Point Comfort came in 1619, and the Pilgrims didn't arrive to Plymouth Rock till 1620. So I think and both of those statements are powerful because they make us remember that our history is such that contributions of Africans have been since the very earliest days, long before our nation was even a country. And second, yeah, we may have gotten here in different ways with different backgrounds, but we are all in the same boat now with a common destiny that we have to work on together.